Hello, health heads. Welcome to this dose of healthcare uprising.
Hi, I'm your host, Heather Pierce. Over the last 20 years, I've worked all over the healthcare industry, from startups to Fortune 5 companies in marketing and communications. Now I'm leveraging my experience and connections in the healthcare realm to bring you this Healthcare Uprising podcast.
Nice. And I'm your producer, Jeremy Carr. I have absolutely no experience in healthcare whatsoever. Your resident man on the street, as it were.
But we're here to inform, educate, and create awareness on all of the latest innovations in healthcare, as well as the most basic aspects of the healthcare system, like how to use your benefits, what's a PPO versus an HMO, why Medicare matters, things like that.
That's what the healthcare uprising is all about. So why don't you tell them what's on today's agenda there, Heather?
So, this is probably one of our most unique episodes so far. We are interviewing Deb Alma, who is the founder and owner of the Poetry Pharmacy, 2 locations in England. She started working with people with dementia in the early part of her career, became an emergency poet with her 1970s ambulance, showing up to festivals and places like that. And she's taught creative writing at the university level in England as well. Been a part of a lot of books as editors and poetry writing. She has her own collection. But Poetry Pharmacy is it, though. And we're interviewing her about the work that she does through Poetry Pharmacy today.
I'm really looking forward to this. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Deb Alma from Poetry Pharmacy.
Hi, and welcome to the Healthcare Uprising podcast. We have Deb Alma with us from the Poetry Pharmacy in England. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Heather. It's really lovely to talk to you and Jeremy too.
Yeah.
Hello.
So today is a little bit different. Typically, our interviews are very, I would say, more clinical in nature. Very obviously healthcare, but we published a podcast interview not that long ago with Art Pharmacy, who is a US-based business who is doing social prescribing for mental health. And we thought Poetry Pharmacy in London, where I happened to see a show one Sunday morning on NBC. Thanks for some national media coverage. Some of it's still good anyway. Brought me here to Deb and the Poetry Pharmacy, and what a great connection with our Art Pharmacy interview, and actually bringing somebody on who is legitimately prescribing poetry.
I'm so excited to hear how this all works.
Yeah. So, Deb, this is going to be really fun. So with that, I want to give you the stage here. So just tell us about your history, your kind of life experiences that led you here, and maybe the origins of Poetry Pharmacy, just kind of how it came to be.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a real pleasure, and I love making these kind of connections through art, across the world, which is lovely. Yeah, it's a kind of long story, really. But oh gosh, in my 40s, I think I did an MA in creative writing, and am a poet. Myself, and I suppose it's kind of lots of different stories that feed together, but the thing that I was doing, I was working with people with dementia, using poetry to assist communication, and some other kind of community, a bit like your Art Pharmacy that you were talking to, kind of going into different care settings. Actually, I went and did some leave-taking poems that we made in hospice care, and I worked with some people with sight loss, and that's the kind of sort of serious underpinning of the work that I went on to do later. And after that, I was looking on eBay, as you do, thinking I wanted a camper van and was going to go on a road trip or something, and came across a vintage ambulance for sale. And on a kind of moment of madness, decided to set up as an emergency poet. So it's a 1950s Morris ambulance. I painted emergency poet on the side and dressed up as a doctor, and drove around to, was invited to arts festivals and schools and conferences and libraries to offer poetry on prescription. and then, so anyway, and that's kind of one story led to another, and I ended up being too old to drive an ambulance with no power steering, and decided that I wanted people to come to me. And I'm talking to you from Shropshire on the English-Welsh borders, where we have a Victorian shop with its original fittings. And I thought it looked like a pharmacy, so set up the poetry pharmacy here.
Is that the Bishop's Castle location?
Yeah, it's in Bishop's
Okay.
Castle. Yeah, yeah.
I did my
And then,
research.
yeah. and then it, it's had lots, right from the beginning, it's had quite a lot of occasional media attention one way or another. The ambulance was very, a big piece of theatre. And yes, and now we have a poetry pharmacy inside Lush on Oxford Street. And we're about to open probably a third poetry pharmacy here in the UK as well.
Oh, wow.
Nice. Nice.
Where would the third one be?
Almost certainly in Bath,
Okay.
Jane Austen Land.
Okay.
Man, we should bring this concept to America in a real way.
I know. I love it.
Can I jump in with a question here, Heather? Do you mind?
Go for it. I can't wait for Jeremy's questions. This is going to be fun.
What was your process with the emergency poet in the ambulance? Like, you would just like pull up and jump out and start reading poetry to people, or like,
well,
did you get calls?
I was in the first one I did was a poetry festival. So people, and quite often it was art or music festival. So people are at a festival, they're very receptive to kind of odd things at a festival. And people would come up and say, what's going on here? I had my poetry pharmacy of my little pills with poems inside the pills under an awning. So people would come up and I would, it's quite explicitly poetry on prescription. They'd go into the back of the ambulance, lie down on a stretcher. I'm dressed as a doctor with a stethoscope and a clipboard.
That's
and then
fantastic.
in a kind of pastiche of a therapy session, ask them very unexpected questions about how they relax, their reading habits, questions that are really lovely to answer. So they're kind of intimate but not invasive. And then at the end of it, prescribe them a poem that, not my poetry, but poetry that was already printed out as a prescription. So I had hundreds of poems to call on.
In the pills, like on a scroll.
No, the
almost,
pills were giveaways under the awning. The people who didn't have time for. So the pharmacy, you go and self-prescribe, and then the poems that I gave them would be one or two complete poems.
So the pill has a little rolled up poem, and like you open the capsule of the pill and there's a little rolled up poem inside.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Why didn't I ever think of that?
I don't know. Got some inspiration here.
It seems to work as well. People really like it.
Do you still use the ambulance, or is it just kind of parked at this point as part of like?
I'm really sad about the ambulance. I kept it for a couple of years here, parked outside the bookshop, but it was kind of rusting away. So we sold it to pay for a camper van, which we have now. But yeah, I didn't have time. Too busy.
Yeah, there's pictures of the ambulance on the website, and we're gonna make sure to put a link in our show notes, and when we do all of our promo and social, make sure everyone sees it. It makes me think made me think of the movie Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
when they took the old ambulance and made it obviously for ghost busting, not saving people, but still fun. I love it. The theatrics of it is kind of in the same vein anyway.
I ain't afraid of no ghost.
Okay.
It might be the nerdiest thing I say today.
It might be.
We'll see how the rest of the conversation goes.
He's pretty good. So now you've got 2 locations, right? That somebody can physically walk into. And are they similar in terms of like the layout? Are they anything different about either of the locations?
They're really different. One is in the middle of nowhere in kind of hill country, with sheep, kind of you can see sheep out the window. And then the other one is on the busiest retail street in the world, I think, on Oxford Street in London. And the idea is the same, so that fundamentally it's a bookshop. and you browse the books according to emotional state. So they're divided into sections, and they're both divided into so we have a first aid section, and so if you have a broken heart, you go to the broken heart books section, and so on. And
Oh my
so it's
gosh,
quite an unusual bookshop.
that's fun. I love
Then
that. How am I feeling
yeah.
today?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, what do you need? And then they both have good coffee shops, and we serve coffee in little kind of chemical boiling flasks. So the whole conceit of the, a pharmacy or a kind of dosage of poetry and coffee is kind of consistent through the whole place.
Nice.
That's
That sounds like a fantastic place,
I want to go there. And
right?
speaking of, wanting to go there. So Oxford location, is it pretty safe to say that you get a lot of people that aren't from around there walking in to that location, or is it kind of a mix of locals or
Yeah,
like
on Oxford Street, we're up on the first floor, so we don't get passing trade particularly, but we sort of went, for us, I suppose, we went viral on social media with posts seen millions of times. So people have heard about us and come and find us. But it's extremely varied, very an international audience. Lots of tourists who love it, but also people who will seek it out in both places. That it's a good place to come if you have a friend who's struggling with something, or it's a good place to go and buy a gift that's a little more thoughtful maybe than buying a scented candle, maybe, although that's thoughtful too. But some words for healing.
What was your process with the dementia patients? What type of poetry would you read with them to jog the memory, as it were?
It was a really interesting project, actually, because and this is what led to doing Emergency Poet very directly. It was not, sometimes it was to share a poem, and sometimes to share a poem in a group. So you might read some poems on kite flying, and what you've done is take a group of people outside in their minds to fly a kite or take them to the sea or whatever, which was a wonderful thing to do. But what I did a lot of the time was make found poems from their words. So sit alongside them and ask questions that are not memory based or memory specific. Talk to me about flowers, or talk to me about the sea, or if we were going to go on a picnic, where would you go? So those kind of idealized states, and then we'd make a poem from their words, and then I would read it back to them so that they were happy with it. So it was poetry, creatively, I suppose, rather than necessarily sharing a poem.
Like a workshop almost.
Yeah,
That's
but one to
really
one
cool.
mostly.
So you get their brain working in that, you get them thinking about specific things in certain
Yeah,
ways, and then you turn it into a work of art to show them from their own
yeah,
thoughts.
yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and it was
Love
often
that.
a prompt. You might do a wine tasting or cheese tasting, or even take the kite, and go outside and fly a kite, and then just see what that, what words, it prompts other ways into memory. And quite often, elderly people in this country, I don't know if it's true there, had learnt poems by heart at school. So if you started to read them a classic poem, I must go down to the sea again, to the lonely sea and sky, and then you'd find that they were reciting it along with you, even though some of those people hadn't spoken for months. So that was nice. It's a good
That's
thing
really
to do.
beautiful.
I grew up in New England, so I learned a lot of Robert Frost in grade school.
Did
He
you?
was he was our local guy where I grew up.
It's quite hard to remember Robert Frost, isn't it? It's not easy. So
No, it's probably why I got so good at memorizing poetry and stuff later in life. It's
You were trained young.
I really did start memorizing that stuff early. Yeah, it's probably Robert Frost is a big part of the reason I'm a poet.
There you
Probably,
go.
really.
Isn't it
Um,
wonderful having that access to poetry in your sort of deep memory? It's a lovely thing.
Yeah. And I've always felt the actual process of writing poetry was therapeutic for me, but I never thought of, it actually being therapeutic for other people in that way.
Mm.
yeah.
But
How I'm curious too, like this actually sets up a good question, Jeremy. How do you how have you seen poetry change people's lives? Obviously, with the dementia patients, that was something very unique, right? Very specific to that. But you do consultations, you've got these shops, you're the emergency poet showing up to festivals and people laying on your stretcher. I mean, you must have seen it affect people in many, many ways.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it was explicitly set up to be light-hearted. A piece of theatre, both the shop and the ambulance. So non-intimidating or not threatening, which is important. So I guess a changing of lives is a grand claim to make, but um, I, it's a big question, that one, because the world of poetry does so many things, whether it's people coming in to, we have workshops here and poetry readings, regular open mics, and then you literally have that poetry community, people, a place and space for people to come together, to be to be heard, um, to listen to other people, and that kind of exchange of an intimate exchange, again, in a safe place. um and then I don't know, I might have prescribed a poem for there was one man who was on his way back from registering the death of his wife, and he came in to the ambulance, and um just being heard and given a gift of a poem was a profound experience for him. And people often cry. I'll give them a poem and in response to something they've said, and you watch it have quite a significant meaning. And when I started it, I thought it was a slightly, I mean, it is theatrical, it's slightly jokey, it's a cartoon ambulance, but actually I saw that it worked. So it was like, even though I made it up and it was slightly silly, I've come to believe in it, if that makes sense.
oh yeah.
I've written poems for people before, and ranging in age and, various relationships.
Mm.
My niece didn't appreciate it as much as I thought that she should have, but
You
I
will like
did
this.
write one for my niece one night. But it's interesting though to see the way that people react, right? Like
Yeah,
it's almost, I want to say, like the antidote to sadness or happiness or depression or anxiety or, confidence, right? Like, or lack of confidence, right? That's kind of what I was trying to do in that
yeah,
particular situation. But if you can write poetry and give it to somebody, it is a little bit of medicine, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I'd like to
yeah,
think so.
yeah. Well, it definitely, I mean, I see it every day, all the
Yeah,
time, thousands and thousands of people.
right.
Yeah, it works. And also, I mean, it does so many things, doesn't it? It can show, if you read somebody's experience, someone who's gone ahead of you and come through something, and that can be really reassuring. Um, or in kind of in a more secular age, to kind of help make sense of the world. Does lots of things. Am I
It's
rambling?
no, I was trying to formulate my next question. Do you do you have like a specific example of a specific poem you gave to somebody in a specific situation? Like, I'm just wondering, like, if you can tell us, like, if I came to you and I'm, say, like the guy who had lost his wife and is literally on his way home from burying his wife, what poem do you have like specific poems in mind that you might hand this guy, or do
Yeah,
you let him find his own?
yeah. I mean, that's a difficult one because he didn't tell me, right. The consultation is set up, so we're not saying tell me about your problems, tell me why you're here. So I was asking him about how he relaxes. When was the last time he stood by the sea or somewhere beautiful? When was the last time he took a deep breath, or his reading habits, in order to learn about how well he was looking after himself. And so it might not be that he wanted the poem that was to address the grief, so I have to listen really carefully. It might not be what he needed. He may have, and losing your wife could be complicated. She could have had a long illness. So I have to wait and see what they're asking for, I suppose. I mean, I do have a lot of poems ready, sort of in my head. The poem, if you ask just without knowing other things about him, would have probably been Mary Oliver in Blackwater Woods. I don't know if you know that poem. That's probably
We'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really the process of getting to the poem that is the therapy. It sounds like you're kind of giving an emotional support session in a way that.
I don't know. I wouldn't call it therapy. I would not make that grand
Well,
claim.
I mean, not officially, but you're kind of putting them through that process.
Yeah.
That the reason that I feel writing poetry is therapeutic, because I go through that process of writing the poem. You're teaching them that process that I have seen to be therapeutic in my own experience.
Yes.
Is what it
Yeah,
sounds
I
like.
would say it was therapeutic, but I wouldn't set myself up as offering.
You're just giving them
therapy.
a process. It's the process. It's not the poem. That, I guess that's my point. It's not the poem itself exactly. It's the process of getting to the poem, and then the poem is kind of the.
Yeah, it's both, because quite often people will hang on. I mean, we know that, don't we? If we're interested in art and particularly poetry, that you hang on to phrases. They can really be a lifeline, can't they? And I remember there's a poem by Derek Walcott, "Love After Love." I don't know if you know that poem, which I would give to someone with a broken heart. And it was really important for me when my heart was broken. I stuck it on the fridge and made it my own. And so the poem was vital. So for people who've got a broken heart, when they've spoken to me, it's both the poem that they can hang on to as well as having been heard, I suppose. But I kind of call it a massage for the mind, because the process itself is you don't expect to be cured by a massage. You don't expect to be it to be profound necessarily, but it's an enjoyable process. So I sort of liken it to that.
That's a great metaphor. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Do you think poetry is a bit of a lost art? I mean, you've been doing this for a while. Have you seen kind of a resurgence of like a love and a passion and interest for the arts? I feel like we got to a point, and this is just my perspective, right? And I have an art degree from college. Like I'm all in, right? Like I've been writing poetry since I was like 12. I've got a stack of books over here, by the way, that I pulled out of my bookcase because I was like, wow, when did I start writing? And I feel like we got super technical for a while, right? Like all of a sudden we're all like in digital world, social media, internet, all the things. And then of course COVID, but like even before that, right? I feel like there was a loss of even books, right? Like physical paper, but I do not like ebooks. I do not like audiobooks. I
No.
don't like listening to books. I like to open the book and smell it and flip the pages and the
Yeah.
whole thing. That to me is therapy, right? Like 100% for me to read something. Um, do you feel like we're getting back to that? Because I feel like we went away from that. And then I don't know. What's your
Yeah.
opinion?
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably in a sense both the wrong and the right person to ask, because I'm absorbed in it. I'm surrounded by the selling of physical books, and that both poetry pharmacies are explicitly set up to to move away from that digital space. You know, they're about real conversations, real coffee, paper, pen, books, you know, and they have, even the music in the background is kind of nostalgic, so that it feels otherworldly, but also the internet is a great space for having brought it back as well. You know, I don't know how aware of book talk you are on TikTok, for example, and I think it's been responsible for a huge resurgence of people enjoying the physical object of a book, and of course we've had a tiny, you know, a couple of years ago, it was very tiny business with 2.5 members of staff, including me. And in the last year, we've had a huge growth. I think we have 23 members of staff now, and it's getting bigger. And so it feels to me like there's a big resurgence of interest in the kind of simplicity and intimacy of one person speaking to another in poetry.
Yeah. And kind of
Does that
the
make
tangible.
sense?
Yeah, it totally does. Like the tangible aspect of it. I can touch it, I can hold it, I can smell it, I can
Yeah.
feel it, and like
Yeah.
community, right? And which is
Mhm.
that was I don't know, I just feel like the concept and sense of community has been lost on a lot of
Yeah.
people. And to me, that is part of mental health, right? So if like we want to tie this into, you know, our podcast, healthcare innovation and poetry pharmacy, I mean, ultimately, community is what I think brings us together, creates that connection. And that when you start lacking that and you're living in this very two-dimensional space on your phone, that's going to
Yeah.
change who you are, right? That's going to change the way that you think, that change the way that you
Yeah.
interact with people, you
Yeah.
know, and then go put
Yeah.
yourself in a city, right? Where like nobody even talks to their neighbors. um, I feel like where we live here in Flagstaff, we have a very strong sense of community here. And I forget that people don't always
Yeah.
experience that. So I don't know.
What I found, I mean, I explicitly set up the poetry pharmacy here as a space for people to come, you know, a door to, you know, when they come in, the staff are very friendly. It's come in, sit down, have coffee, spend some time here. But I was really surprised to see that even in Oxford Street, that people sitting, there's only 4 or 5 tables. It's a very small coffee shop, but people start reading the poem out, that we give them a tiny little poem extract with their coffee, and they'll read it out and everyone will go quiet and listen. And then people start talking to each other, strangers, even in London. And that really surprised me, you know. And we employ people because they're kind. That's the first quality that they need, you know. And so if you go into the Poetry Pharmacy on Oxford Street, it's as friendly and warm and welcoming as a small community bookshop here in Shropshire. And we've managed to do that, and I'm really proud of that.
And actually in your locations too, I mean, you've got the bookstore, which by the way, separating it by like Broken Heart versus whatever your other, I would love to know what those other sections are, but
Oh, that's a great question,
that is
actually.
brilliant. But then you've got the poetry pharmacy, but you do other things though, right? You talked about the consultations, which you had done in the ambulance, but you still do consultations in the store and online, right?
Yeah. We had sort of slowed up doing those over the last few months because we were working on opening a second bookshop in
Mhm.
London. But yeah, we have a velvet chaise longue here, so people come into the bookshop, go upstairs into our poetry reference library and lie down, and they have tea and cake, and they have poems and a bottle of pills and a book from the bookshop as part of the consultation. And we have lots of things going on here. We have 3 different book groups: children's book club, open mics, book launches, lots of workshops. So that's really important to.
Mhm.
It's really much harder to do that in London, but if we have a bookshop in Bath, we'll we'll replicate all of that. Yeah.
And you do online courses too, is that right? Or are those inactive right now just because
We
you've
no,
been
we've got
busy?
yeah, we've got one that's just closed. Actually, it's just started, and it's run by a good friend of the Poetry Pharmacy, Sophie Howarth, who started something called the School of Life a few years ago with philosopher Alan Bouton. I don't know if you've come across the School of
Mm-mm.
Life there in the US. You might be interested in them. Actually, it's kind of philosophy around good mental health,
Mm,
books and cards, and they do workshops in London as well.
interesting. Yeah,
But
mental
yeah,
health is definitely a lane for us on the
yeah.
show. We're really interested in diving into that more. So, yeah, mental health, poetry pharmacy.
I would like to go back to that question you just hinted at, Heather. And what are the actual sections in the store?
Or
What?
some of them
Yeah,
anyway.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, they're kind of broad sections, and then there are subsections. So
Okay.
for example, Broken Heart would be under Words for Love, which is the section, and that would have subsections for motherhood or friendship, or that kind of thing. But so if you move along the bookshop, it moves. The idea is that you shop intuitively. So each section is connected to the next section, and broadly, I suppose, laid out through kind of stages of a life. So we've got the first aid section with the books that you might need in times of immediate trouble. Some good anthologies, books on bibliotherapy, and our pills. I think we have about 50 different titles or something of pills, and then after that, we call it calm. So it's books on anxiety, stress, and so on. And the next section is broadly called becoming, which is about being yourself in the world, confidence, seize the day, books on feminism. And then it goes to words for love, so relationships. And then where does it go? And then so it could either go into parenthood, childhood, being on single, and then moves into aging, ill health, depression, death, and grief, and recovery, comfort. Then it goes to we've got a just sort of general section which we call the best medicine. So um, and wild remedy, going out into nature being good for you. And then inspiration, which are books on arts and health, creativity, journaling, and so on. So yeah,
Are
Oh,
I
are the
think
poems that are available like worked into those sections somehow along with the books, or is it a completely separate, like would I go to like a different wall to pick my poem?
no, and that's almost the key thing. It's so that people can. I believe that most people are intimidated by poetry, so this is set up explicitly to help them find the poetry that they might respond to. So they know that poetry anthology is about a woman who's had a broken heart, and so they're more likely to try it. We also have an A to Z of poetry here in Shropshire because we have enough space, but not in London. So yeah, the poetry goes into the right sections.
Okay.
that's
That's
awesome.
that is really cool. I think I need to go to England.
I know. I
Yeah,
haven't wanted to go overseas so much in a while.
I have to go find my
that would
roots
be
because
lovely.
I did one of those
Oh,
ancestry tests, and
yeah,
not that it was a surprise, but like I'm like 75% like English, Welsh, Scottish.
really?
Yeah, oh
Do,
yeah, yeah.
and you didn't know that
I'm
before? What's
I
your?
did. I
Oh,
knew
you
I
did.
was, but like I didn't know it was going to be that high of a percentage, and Irish too. So, yeah.
Okay. Can you
So
trace your roots back through your immediate family? Do you know
I
that?
did, and both sides. My husband too. So he's like very, very English Welsh as well. So like
Mm.
our ancestral makeup are very similar. Um,
Interesting.
and so yeah, now I have to do my kids and to see what theirs looks like. But
Yeah. Which
yeah,
part
it's
of the UK did it come up with? Was
for
it
say that again.
which part of the UK, or was it very general?
It's actually really specific.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah, it gets pretty specific. So if I remember, I'd have to look it up, but I feel like it was like Southwest England. So,
Okay.
and then
Yeah.
Wales, of
That would be the
course.
Welsh
And
borders then, southwest.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I should come. I mean, we should,
Yeah, it is your
Jeremy,
spiritual home.
it is. I need to come back to the motherland and we need to do a show right out of the poetry pharmacy.
I'm
Yeah.
mostly Irish myself.
Yeah.
Are
Both of
you?
both of my parents are very heavily Irish with a smattering of a bunch of other things in there, but
Yeah.
mostly Irish.
Yeah.
Last name's
Okay.
Carr. I have a very old Irish name.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because the American accent for me, you can hear the link to Irish
Well,
English.
I'm originally from Boston.
Yeah.
When I had a
Yeah.
Boston accent, it was a different thing,
Yeah. Yeah,
When I was hanging out at
You're
Fenway
not from
Park by the
Arizona.
Charles River.
we're not local Arizona. I'm from New Jersey, right outside New York City
Okay.
too. So yeah,
Yeah.
we're northeasterners.
We've both been
Yeah.
in Arizona for decades, though, at this point. So
Yeah, yeah.
my
But
It sounds
accent's
so
pretty much gone.
it's very exotic to me.
well, when you come to the Grand Canyon, you'll have a tour guide. So
Okay. That'd be lovely.
I was what she means by that. I was a professional tour guide before COVID for years. If you ever want to see
Fascinating.
the Grand Canyon, Sedona, stuff like that, please hit me up
yeah,
because
Okay.
I know how to do that. I used to do
I'll
it
come
for a
and
living.
find you and we can read poetry.
we can read
We'll read
poetry.
poetry on the rim of the Grand Canyon
Yeah.
together. It'd
I
be a
mean,
wonderful day.
that actually
Oh
sounds
my
like good therapy
You know,
yeah.
because
Well,
I
it
have
would
read
be.
poetry on the rim of the Grand Canyon before.
it
Oh,
is it is
yeah.
actually a place where people go to for artistic kind of outlet. You always see a lot of people painting,
Mhm.
like the canyon, and
Yeah.
just, doing like meditation or
Yeah.
hiking through it, which is, being
It's
out in
like a
nature, I think.
pilgrimage, isn't it? To
Yeah.
stand in awe next to something like that.
It's one of those things that you can't understand it until you see it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I can imagine.
Pictures give you an idea, but you don't understand until you
Oh,
stand in that thing.
definitely coming.
And it
Wonderful.
never gets old. I've been there hundreds of times and it never gets old.
Yeah.
It never gets old.
I forget. Sometimes I take it for granted. It's like places like
No.
Sedona, that are around here.
Yeah.
I was just there yesterday. Oh, it was like big deal. I was in Sedona yesterday.
Wow.
Just one of the most beautiful places on the
Just,
planet. That's all.
no
Of course.
biggie.
Yeah. Wow. I'm coming.
Yeah, of course. Now I think of London as like a very exotic, like far away, cool place that is, 100% a bucket list for me. So,
Have you not
Maybe
been
we can make it a
before?
business trip.
yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
go do a business trip to London.
There we
Yeah.
go. We'll go to the poetry pharmacy.
You
Yeah.
had better at
Um,
this point.
yeah, or one of your I don't know. I'm ready for a poetry
I
reading.
wanna-
I don't know about you.
I want to do our open mic.
Yeah, and actually,
Wouldn't that be
so
lovely? I'd love that.
we have our own open mic.
Do you want to
So
read our poems?
in the vein of our very unusual interview today, which is super fun for us, given that we are interviewing the Poetry Pharmacy of London, in Shropshire. Jeremy and I both being poets ourselves, we both have a poem we wanted to read. Each read a poem, and then we'll close things up and get some information from you so we can share with our listeners how to find you. So, Jeremy, do you want to
You want me
read
to go first?
You go first. Mine's short, so
Mine's just like a minute. Let me bring
Yeah.
it up here. Okay, this is called. Oh, I'm used to standing up when I do this. Let me fix my screen so we can see.
this is Jeremy's first very, very public reading.
I have read in a lot of rooms in front of people, but I've never put something on the interwebs or anything now.
This is exciting.
Let me,
All right. you
sorry,
got
this is taking me a minute. Let me get where I can read it. Here we go. Okay. This is called Constant. Constant. A subtle motion, an almost unsensed shadow in darkness, flits spasmodically through your mind, searching for a lost dream. A frayed thread of memory acts as poor guide to this once glimpsed moment of potential perfection, but pay it little mind. For perfection is a myth, and dreams are only dreams, and life moves on so fast, and new dreams always come. Perfection is in the journey, the change. We must be willing to rearrange ourselves to suit our own imperfections. To stop learning, stop changing, stop desiring is to stop living. We must constantly re-become ourselves in order to remain ourselves. For the only constant is change, so we must constantly change with it, or be lost in a dream of what can never be. Ignore those shadows of perfection flitting tirelessly through your thoughts, and allow yourself to constantly become. Thank you.
Very, very nice.
I thought it
Yeah,
might fit the
lovely.
theme of the conversation.
I
Yeah,
think that would be in your becoming section in your
it would be in becoming, wouldn't it? I
There you go.
love your use of internal rhyme. It was really musical, you know, kind of looping sounds as well as it, you know, its meaning. Lovely.
I owe it all to Dr. Seuss.
Lovely.
that is my style. You captured it immediately. I have a lot of that free flow rhyme kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's really subtle because it's not the end rhyme; it's an internal rhyme, which I love. Yeah, and what was it? Become ourselves.
I'm glad you liked it. I'm very glad you liked it.
Well, mine is not like that at all. Mine's really short. So I'm going to read mine. And unlike Jeremy, I write on random pieces of paper all over the place. And so I have like literal stacks of things. It's envelopes, it's post-it notes, it's ripped pieces of notebook paper. Sometimes it's in a book. Sometimes I can't even read it. I don't know. I have terrible handwriting. But I don't even know when I wrote this one, but I found it and I decided I'm going to read it. This is called Streets Through a Window. Funny what we see. It's a hard rain that falls, and we hear the thunder. It starts to break my heart, but not enough to break it apart. So we bring our hearts together. And isn't it fitting how we see what we are doing to each other? Streets in a window. I see you through it all. A hard rain will fall.
Oh, lovely.
That should almost be turned into lyrics. That sounds like at the beginnings of a song.
I do tend to write like song lyrics. That is maybe my style, is that basically most of my poems can be turned into a song. So there you go.
But really beautifully observed, you know, just a sort of still, quiet moment. Really lovely, calm.
Yeah, the second time you say streets through the window, it's like there's a moment there. I liked that.
Poetry it's an outlet for sure. I mean, all artistry is, and I think that's something we talk a lot about, particularly in the vein of mental health on the show, and mental health care treatments and kind of the alternative ways to approach curing our minds, right? And our hearts, I think, and kind of from the inside out, right? No pharmaceuticals actually required sometimes.
No, it's lovely to, you know, I mean, we recommend we put our little poetry pill bottles in the bathroom cabinet, you know, so if you're feeling stressed, you go open the cabinet and instead you get a little poem and take that down and, you know, slow your breathing a little and calm down instead.
Yeah, treat it physically like medicine, and mentally it will work more like medicine.
Yeah.
You know, we trick ourselves into stuff like that all the time in this life. The whole placebo effect is a very real thing.
It's very real. Yeah. And why, you know, sometimes we just need to open a cupboard, take something, you know, that we need to feel that we're doing something to address it. So, you know, why not put art in the way instead?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a really lovely place to end on today. And so, Deb, thank you so much for coming on. But please tell us and our listeners where you can be found, maybe your website, if you have any social media pages where we can follow you.
Yeah, we're very easy to find. Probably the best thing is to go to the website, so then you can follow the links from there. So that's www.poetrypharmacy.co.uk.
Great.
.co.uk. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll make
sure you get that in the show notes. Yeah.
And .com. think they both go to the same place.
We'll share
Oh,
that.
okay, cool. And you got the .com. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And we'll share I will definitely link to the NBC coverage how I found you. We'll definitely include that as well. So that everyone can get a little bit better taste of what you're about. But
It makes me feel like we're moving up. We're getting people from national news coverage coming on our podcast.
I know. We're just telling you.
We're new, so that's actually kind of impressive to me.
Yeah. The only way is up.
Well, it was impressive to me. I think it was just entirely ridiculous that we were featured on the NBC, frankly.
The world works in mysterious ways and brings people together.
I just like that America's talking about poetry.
It's great.
Honestly. It really is. You mentioned it earlier, but it's really kind of a lost art in this country anyway. Like I listen to old recordings of like Charles Bukowski and stuff, people like that sometimes. And he walks out on stage to a crowd cheering.
Yes.
There's thousands of people sitting in a theater waiting for him to come out and read poetry at them. When's the last time that happened in America, that people bought a ticket to go listen to someone read poetry? I mean, the open mics are great. Poetry slams and open mics, those are a very live thing here, but who's the last guy that sold out a theater to read poetry?
I think Bob Dylan is probably the closest to a poet on a big stage.
but it's music. It's not the same thing.
It is music.
It's not the same thing.
I know. Well, if you want to find poetry in person, Poetry Pharmacy. So we have to come visit you in England. So you've the 2 locations on Oxford Street. So anyone that's listening to this or watching this on YouTube, if you're visiting London, get yourself to Oxford Street and go see Deb and the Poetry Pharmacy, or Shropshire. Am I saying that right? Shropshire, right on the Welsh border. Yep. If you're out there in the middle of nowhere, driving around, enjoying the countryside, make sure you pull in and get some poetry to ease your mind and your soul.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb, so much for coming on. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Yeah. Awesome.
And there you go, our conversation with the original emergency poet, Deb Alma from Poetry Pharmacy. I haven't wanted to go to London so bad ever.
Agreed. We got to make a trip.
I know, it would be cool. We got to go together so we can write it off. You can bring the fam.
Yeah.
Or at least Jake. I don't know. Can we leave the kids at home?
Yes. Yes, we can.
But so I'm getting sidetracked already. What's our main takeaways here, Heather?
So I have to say first, I was literally watching the Sunday news. Like, I think it was the NBC. And I'll have to make sure we put this in the show notes. And I saw the media coverage of Deb's Poetry Pharmacy in London and Shropshire, England. And I thought, gosh, we have to get her on, because we had just done the art pharmacy interview, or we had just set it up, and social prescribing. I believe that's episode 3. So
episode 6, actually.
Oh, episode 6. Sorry.
Art Pharmacy was episode 6, I believe.
So what a great tie back. We talk about on the show trying to create or to do multiple episodes to create kind of a bigger story, and to show kind of where all the connections are made across all this innovation and just people doing, cool stuff. And the Poetry Pharmacy was just a great way to connect to the art pharmacy and the power of art, right? The power of social prescribing. And literally the Poetry Pharmacy is doing exactly kind of what the art pharmacy's mission is. The art pharmacy company. And so anyway, it was just like a really beautiful connection. And even cooler just to bring on somebody as kind of cool and interesting and inspiring as Deb. And just kind of her background. So I don't know, like, it's just fun. And we both like poetry, and we both read and write it. So even better.
The coolest thing about her is she let us read our poetry at her.
Yes, we did.
I always appreciate when someone lets me read poetry at them.
That was fun.
That
was fun.
Hope everybody enjoyed that.
I mean, it's kind of a lost and dying art.
And actually, my other favorite part is the poetry pills.
Yes.
It makes me laugh, but it's such a brilliant thing at the same time.
And the way that she categorizes the books.
Yeah.
You've never heard of anything like that. And then having the poetry pills in the sections that they kind of fit with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just the whole concept of it is brilliant.
They should lend out mood rings when you walk in the door so you know which shelf to go to.
Right? Am I sad? Am I angry? Am I
Yeah.
stressed?
It's purple. I need that section over there.
Right. But it is that like intuitive kind of search, I guess is what she said. And anyway,
Yeah.
I just think I don't know, it's just cool. Like I never thought anything like this would ever exist. And
And
here it is.
I thought when I heard it, I was like, so they like give people poetry to read or like read poetry at people and call it as like a therapeutic thing. But it's not even that. Like she sits you down and like you write the poem basically. Like she like kind of puts you through this mindset like we talked about in the episode. You know, what I feel when I write poetry is that therapeutic. And she's teaching other people to access that in their own minds, which is, I mean, this woman's brilliant.
Yeah. And all the other
Love it.
things that they do, like the consultations and
Yeah. Yeah.
the online courses and all the other cool stuff.
But
So,
before I wax any more poetic, let me just ask everyone out there to hit all those happy little fun buttons, whatever platform you're on, the likes and subscribes and shares. If you got a second to leave us a rating and review, let us know how we're doing. It's always appreciated. If you really want to get into the action on the Uprising, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/healthcareuprising. You can get in for as little as $1 a month, get early access to all upcoming stuff, and we'll be building, private chats for our community there and whatnot as we go. I don't know. Where else can they find us, Heather?
you can find us online at healthcareuprising.com, as well as on all the social media platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. Just search Healthcare Uprising Podcast. You'll find us. We are pretty active out there, and you can look for when new episodes drop and our highlight reels. Great way to stay in touch. Also, if you have a story to tell, new product, a business, you're a founder, co-founder in a startup, anything that's doing innovation in healthcare, give us a shout at healthcareuprising@gmail.com. We'd love to chat with you and bring you on the show. Also, our human stories, a really, really, really important part of why this show ticks and works. And, it's all about humans at the end, right? So if you've got a good human story, good, bad, ugly, or otherwise, give us a shout too at that same email address, healthcareuprising@gmail.com. We'd also love to have you on the show. And that's it for this dose of Healthcare Uprising. So until next time, just keep looking for the good in the world, because sometimes it's where you least expect it.
And stay gold, pony boy. This has been a Shut Up production.